Descendants of the Seas series, Book 1, Roset's Skyless Kingdom by Lost Word. Prologue, Part 1, In the Open Seas. And you, completely unaware of all that unfolds behind the pages and of the eyes watching you from behind the ink-stained letters, will continue to read it all as fiction. You will never know, yet you would wish to know. And once you do, you will wish you never had. "Captain!" a sailor bellowed, clinging tightly to the ropes to avoid being swept away by the waves crashing onto the deck. The captain, struggling to control the helm with the ship's burliest man beside him, turned toward the voice. The pitch-black darkness, and as if that weren't enough, the rain pouring like a broken sky, severely limited visibility. It took him a moment to spot the sailor through the chaos. The sailor, straining his voice to be heard over the storm, continued shouting. "The forestay!" Just then, a thunderous crack rang out, and the ship shuddered from keel to stern. Several crew members who hadn't secured themselves lost their footing and were thrown to the deck, then, with the next monstrous wave, into the sea. The sailor who had been shouting was flung toward the forecastle, still clinging to the rope. He had swallowed seawater and now flailed like a fish out of water, gasping for air. "It's coming loose," he muttered unconsciously. The once powerful voice faded, weakening with exhaustion. Then, with a final cough, he spat out the last of the seawater onto the deck. "Thanks for the early warning, Duon," the captain shouted back, his voice sharp and sarcastic, rainwater spraying from his mouth. Immediately after the captain's scolding, the crew began shouting over the roar of the storm, trying to relay the warnings to each other. "The forestay is gone! Man overboard!" At once, part of the crew rushed to the port side with ropes in hand to help those who had fallen overboard, while others sprinted toward the prow to assess the state of the forestay. The rest were already busy tending to the damage they had sustained in the earlier onslaught. "Can't see them anywhere!" one of the sailors shouted. They had reached the port side to look for their fallen comrades, but the waves were so ferocious that none dared lean too far over the rail. "The waves have swept them away by now," another called out in reply. Just then a fierce wave crashed from starboard, slamming the two men against the portside bulwark, knocking the breath clean out of their lungs. Thanks to their safety lines still holding fast, they were spared from being tossed into the sea. Elsewhere, a group near the prow was engaged in a heated argument, trying to keep their footing amidst the crashing waves. They were most likely debating who would climb the mast in such a storm. At that moment, a sound like a massive whip cracking across the sky split the air. Then, sudden brilliance. Argero's eyes turned skyward. He looked to the wind vane perched atop the yardarm. The wheel of fate's ribbon flailed madly, whipped by a southern wind, straining northward as if to flee into the storm. "Captain Argero!" another voice cried out in desperation. "A twister is coming at us fast, from the north!" Argero's gaze snapped to the north. "No, no, no," he muttered to himself in panic. Lightning danced in the black clouds, swirling around the massive waterspout rising into the heavens. The sails hissed as they strained toward the forming vortex. The funnel grew with each breath, and the ship began to pull backward. The captain shouted to the man beside him, "Port hard over! Port hard over!" At once the burly man and Argero threw their full weight against the helm, trying to veer the ship to port. After a desperate struggle, the vessel caught the wind astern and began to sail before it. For a moment, aside from the storm's relentless assault, there was an eerie stillness. Argero looked toward the crow's nest, where the lookout still clung to life despite the damage. He was surprised the man had survived. Then he called out, "Any sight of a ship?" He was referring to the vessel they had been locked in battle with only moments ago. "No, Captain!" came the cry, loud and defiant against the storm's roar. Argero turned his eyes back to the sails. Their condition after the fight was deplorable. The forestay had snapped, and the sea with every wave seemed hell-bent on claiming his men for its own. Panic rippled across the deck like lightning eager to strike. "Captain," a voice called after a moment, "we've temporarily rigged the forestay with the halyard, but this storm's not doing us any favours." Argero nodded grimly. Then, without warning, a tremendous wave struck from starboard. The ship groaned and heeled violently, her sails dipping toward the sea as if they might be swallowed whole. When the wave receded, the vessel surged upright with a thunderous roar. Water cascaded off the deck in frothing torrents, spilling over the bulwarks and dragging several sailors with it into the dark depths. Argero scanned the deck, and in the aftermath realized that nearly half his crew was gone. "Captain Argero!" came a voice from the main deck, laced with terror. A sailor's head emerged from the hatch. His eyes were wide with fear. The keel took heavy damage in the last fight. "The ship's taking on water fast, Captain. Unfortunately, the flooding is nothing new," Argero muttered grimly. Then he turned to the burly man beside him. "Lurd! Get to the captain's quarters and take whatever planks you can find. Get them to the bilge. Try to patch the breach." After a brief pause of stunned silence, he bellowed, "What are you waiting for, you bilge rats? For the ship to sink?" Without another word, Lurd darted from the helm with surprising agility for a man his size. Argero turned to the same sailor who had warned about the forestay earlier. "Duorn! You two, go to the captain's quarters. Check the charts. We must have drifted toward the Torrell Sea. Pray we've not gone past it. See if there's any land or cove nearby we can shelter in. Move!" "Aye, Captain," Duorn called back in his youthful voice and ran below deck, straight toward the captain's quarters beneath the helm platform. Just as he reached it, Lurd emerged from within, carrying Argero's massive desk in his arms. Duorn couldn't help but wonder how he planned to get it through the narrow hatch. But Lurd, perhaps sensing the question in his eyes, gave his answer in a single motion. With a grunt, he slammed the desk against his knee and split it clean in two. Inside, Duorn found the room in disarray. Charts were scattered everywhere. With a weary sigh, he dove into the pile, searching. "Captain!" he finally shouted what must have been hours later as he climbed back onto the main deck. Lost in the maps, he hadn't realized the storm's fury had lessened. The deck was calmer now, save for the wind still whipping the torn sails overhead. Duorn stopped just short of the helm and held out the chart. "There's an island dead ahead," he called. Then, lifting his gaze, he saw it, already looming off the starboard bow. Once again, Argero said from the helm, voice thick with sarcasm, "Thank you for the timely warning, Duorn. But Captain—" Duorn hesitated. He turned the chart this way and that, frowning. "There's a mark here, 8 cross-hatched lines drawn right over the island. What does it mean?" Before Argero could reply, a deep, unnatural growl echoed from the mountains of the island. Several sailors gathered at the railing, peering into the mist as the sound grew louder and more frequent. "Listen to that," one said, "and people say the sea is the most terrifying part," muttered another. "I'd take the storm over whatever's growling on that land." They didn't yet realize the sound was not from the island. It was the sea itself howling, the cry rebounding off the cliffs. Argero's eyes widened. He had deciphered the symbol. A deafening roar split the air behind them, sharp and absolute as a blade through canvas. The firmament itself seemed to quiver, and then a stench, rank as 1,000 rotting carcasses, rolled over the deck. Everyone turned. From the waves rose 8 colossal, writhing limbs, reaching skyward into the churning dark. For a moment the crew froze, hearts seized in dread. Then panic exploded. Some screamed, others fled aimlessly across the slick deck. A few, whether driven mad or desperate to swim for shore, threw themselves into the sea. But the creature's maw was waiting. A monstrous roar drowned even the thunderclaps. Argero Kulosbero stood motionless, knowing full well there was no hope left. The creature's titanic arms came crashing down upon the deck. With a sound like the world being split, the ship broke in two. So that's how this chapter comes to a close. The storm, the sea, and something far worse than either, well, they've all conspired to bring Argero and his crew to the very edge of existence. The ship is lost, the men scattered or gone, and a monstrous presence now rules the waves where once only fear and salt reigned. But what, I wonder, will become of those who survived? Where will the tide carry them? And what secrets lie waiting on that cursed island? Will Argero find the strength to face whatever comes next, or has fate already sealed their doom? I suppose, my friends, we'll just have to wait and see. Because the sea, she never gives up her mysteries so easily.